Hi everybody and welcome to the second part of the tutorial. My name is Maltenan, and in this part I will show you how to create a controller for the balls that we've created for the one ball actually, and that we've created in the previous part. For those of you who skipped the first part because they felt capable of doing it by themselves, just as a reminder, we created this ball by making 4 different layers. Each layer has a circle effect applied to it, also as a transform effect to create the skew. As you can see, we can adjust this value and everything changes pretty nicely. And the layers are parented to each other. I mean that each layer is parented to the layer directly above it. So in this way, when we change this layer, for example, all the layers below follow along. So this is pretty useful. And the high 0, 1 layer, which is the last layer, looking from the from the bottom, is parented to a controller layer, which is basically a null object. As you can see, we can drag this and all the layers follow along. We can scale this and do pretty much anything with it. And in this part I will show you how to make this even more useful by using expressions and expression controls that you can find in effects and preset palette. So okay, let's get right to it. First of all, we would like to have some kind of a size control over the ball. So let's just select the controller layer, drag the slider control to the layer, and let's call this size offset. To change the name of the effect, just hit enter on your keyboard, and then you can get this text box and type pretty much anything. So let's go back to size offset. And why it's called offset? It's called offset because we are not going to change this value to whatever it is on the slider controller, but we are going to add 2 values. So the real scale value of this layer plus whatever it is on this slider. So in this way you can just adjust this by hand and then globally change the size of the whole ball and so on. And why are we not doing this by using null object? Because null object gives us pretty much the same thing. Well, basically we can animate the controller object to just create, for example, a bouncing ball. So like it bounces off the ground and it squeezes a bit like this, and then it bounces up and unsqueezes again. So sorry, I've dragged the wrong layer. We should lock the layers to avoid that kind of problem, but I was planning to do it later on. So let's just undo. But you get the idea, right? And what if we would decide that we need the ball to be bigger? Then we would have just to select all the keyframes of the scale property and just adjust them by hand. And why to do that when we can have just a nice slider controller over here? So let's get right to it. Let's reset the transform so we can get the default position of the null object. And the first thing you need to know is that the scale property, just the same as the anchor point and position, are 2-dimensional values. So they have like x and y axis. And as you can see, the controller, the slider controller, has only 1 value. So we cannot add like 100% and 100% plus this, because After Effects would go say, hey, I don't know what you mean. So I will just show you how to deal with this. Let's just twirl this down. We're going to need it, and let's just set this parameter to scale by pressing S. And now, to create an expression, select the property you want to, just drive by an expression. Go to Animate and Add Expression, or use the shortcut, or Alt-click on the stopwatch. So this is it. As you can see, the preview window is now disabled, so we can write the expression and then it refreshes. The default expression is equal to whatever it is on this value, so it's like transform.scale. Just take this value and use it, nothing else. Let's just extend this a bit. And now, as you can see, like I said, the scale property is two-dimensional value, and basically the After Effects is pretty clever about this, because when it sees something like this, in most cases it creates the code for us. We don't need to write anything. Just use the pick whip tool and drag it into the value that you're interested in, and this is the code that After Effects create. Let me just shut this off for a second so we can see this better. Well, basically what this line do is it takes the value from this composition, from the layer called controller 01, and it takes the slider value of the effect called size offset. So as you can see, everything is here, and this is exactly this value. And what's more, it assigns this value to a variable. And why is that? Because we could just take this code and paste it in here. By the way, this is how you use 2 or 3-dimensional or multi-dimensional values inside of After Effects and inside of JavaScript, by the way, because this is basically a JavaScript. And we could just paste it in here, but I think this is much more easier to read and to understand later on. Besides, you can always multiply this by some factor, like by 10, and then this values changes also, so you don't need to just write multiply by 10 and multiply by 10 in here. Okay, so I will just change this to SFO, size offset. Why it's FSO? SFO. Now let's just call this size offset SO. That's okay. And let's just put this in here. And this is basically it. But right now, what this does, it takes the value from the slider and applies it directly to the scale value, and we don't want that. As you can see, when it's 0, it's 0 also in here, and when it's negative in here, and we don't want that. We want this value to be equal to 100 plus, or to whatever it is, really, because we can still animate this the traditional way, and the expression and this value will just pop together. They will work together as one. So we want this to be whatever we want it plus the offset. So basically what we are going to do is to use a pick whip tool again and set this scale parameter and just write add plus, and that's it. And just to show you, we can still animate this. Let's scale this up here, and let's scale it down in here, and let's scale it up in here again. Sorry for that. And this works pretty nicely, and this slider is also keyable. So let's create a keyframe. Let's go in here, let's go like this, let's go like this, and let's go like this. And as you can see, everything works together smoothly. This is pretty nice. This is exactly what we wanted. And like I said, this can be pretty useful when you're creating this, bouncing and squeezing ball. So I hope this is pretty useful for you. And yes, that's basically it. Let's just turn the value to 100. And I wasn't exactly planning to do this, but we could also create sliders for all the layers, because right now we have an expression only on high 01 layer, and as you know, all the layers are parented relatively to each other, so in the end they're also parented to high 01, so they're just fell along, and this is good. But what if you would like, you know, for example, this layer to be scaling up and down and the rest to, you know, just stay the same? So you would have to find the layer and then animate it in here and stuff like that, and this is not pretty cool, especially because we are going to have a bunch of duplicates of these layers, so it would be pretty hard to find the correct layer and stuff like that. So I think we're going to use size offsets all along. So let's just rename this to maybe ball size offset. As you can see, the expression changed also, so After Effects changed this for us. It's pretty nice. We don't have to worry about it. It doesn't always work like this, but in this case it does. So let's just create another slider. Let's call this gray light size offset. We can just copy the expression and then just click on the remaining layers, press S to reveal the scale properties. Let's select those, and we can use edit. Oh no, we cannot. We have to first use a copy expression. Sorry for that. Where is it? It's in here. So let's select the layer. Let's use copy expression only. Where's my copy expression only? Come on. Ah, here it is. Okay. And now let's use edit paste. And as you can see, the expression is pasted correctly. But we just need to change this value on each layer. So let's reveal the controller. Let's create all the sliders. We can use Ctrl D, so like duplicate, also on effects. You probably know that already. So let's call this gray dark size offset, and duplicate again, and black size offset. Okay, let's twirl them down in here also. So now we can just use the pick whip tool to assign the values. So select the line you're interested in, use the pick whip tool and just drag this up a bit. Okay, that's it. We could also, you know, just change this part, but I think it's much faster to use the pick whip tool. So that's what we are doing. Dark size offset, and last but not least, dark size offset. Hit enter on your number keyboard, and that's it. That's pretty much it. Works pretty nicely. So basically that's it. I think this covers this tutorial. No, not really, because there's one thing we need to deal with. As you can see, the null object has the usual transform properties, just like every other layer. We can rotate it, scale it up and down, move it around, change the anchor point, or whatever, but as you can see the opacity is set to 0, and it doesn't affect other layers. So we need to fix this, and to fix this we are going to use the slider control again. So let's call this opacity. We don't need it to be a opacity offset, I guess. I mean, we could, but then this tutorial will take forever. If you need it, you already know how to do it, so I'll just leave it as it is. And let's twirl down the opacity. To do that, just select the layer and press T on your keyboard. Let's press Alt, click on the stopwatch, and let's just bind the value from the opacity slider to the opacity of the layer using a pick whip tool. And that's right. But now, as you can see, only the first segment changes, because like I said, the opacity doesn't affect other layers either on null object or you know, in case of parenting, so we need an expression to do it. And I think we'll just bind everything to the high 0,1 layer just to know, to get this over with. Oh, sorry, this and this. So right now we have a global opacity controller. This is pretty nice. And we can actually do one more thing just to show you. You probably know about hold keyframes and stuff like that. You know, when, for example, you want the opacity to be set to 50% all the way, and then suddenly change its value to 100, and you would have to do this each time you need, for example, to hide and show the ball. And I think it would be pretty nice if we can just turn the ball on and off. So let's use the checkbox control, and let's call this on, off. A checkbox generally returns values like 0 for unchecked and 1 for checked. So and also true or false. What we need to do is to, because we have already all the opacity values driven by this opacity, and this opacity is driven by the controller's slider, we can do it like this. If this checkbox, just let me drill it down again. If this checkbox is checked, then set the value to whatever it should be from this slider, and if it's unchecked, then just set the opacity to 0. And we could, if you're familiar with JavaScript and programming in general, we would do this like this. If, use the pick whip tool, this checkbox equals 1 or equals true, then do this, else do this, blah blah blah. But we're not going to do it, because I think a much faster way, maybe not elegant in terms of programming, but it's pretty much faster, would be take the pick whip tool, get the value from the checkbox, and go like this. If this equals 0, then 0. And let's check if this works. Works pretty nicely. Let's check the opacity. Still working. So I think that's it. Once again, this is Maltenan. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I will hope that you will meet me on my webpage, which is maltenan.com, to see other exciting tutorials. See you then. Cheers.